This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 2, Episode 65 of the Jumblethink Podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast, where we interview leading entrepreneurs and we learn how they turn their ideas and dreams into reality. Along the way, they'll give you tips and ideas of how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. On the podcast today, our guest is John McGarvey. More about John in a moment. I want to encourage you, wherever you like to listen to your podcast, head on over there right now and click that subscribe button for the Jumblethink Podcast. It only takes a moment, and you'll get to be able to check out some past incredible guests, along with some incredible episodes we have in store for you in the future. If you like listening on iTunes, all you have to do is go to jumblethink.com/iTunes. And for Spotify, jumblethink.com/Spotify. It will take you right to the app, right to our page where you can click subscribe. Now let's jump into today's episode. Hey there, welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. This is the Jumblethink Podcast, and we have an incredible episode with John McGarvey lined up for you. Today's episode is being sponsored by Opportunity in China. If you haven't already, make sure you check out our episode with MC Miller, who is the founder and CEO of Opportunity in China. It was the last episode, so real easy to find and learn a little bit more about what they're doing. Now, have you been looking for a way to change your career or social prospects? Do you see the world around you changing and haven't quite figured out what path to take? Well, you're not alone in seeking opportunity. Visit opportunityinchina.com for access to scholarships to attend university in China, or if you have a bachelor's degree already, opportunityinchina.com provides access to jobs in the education sector all across China. Working in China is not only often well paid, but it will place you among 1/5 of the world's population, boosting your social network, bringing you more deeply into the story of globalization, opening doors you never knew existed. Now, seize your opportunity now. Visit their website at opportunityinchina.com. By the way, Opportunity China also has a really killer podcast that you can check out on all the normal places that you like to listen to podcasts, including YouTube and iTunes. They are doing some really cool stuff to tell the stories of working and living abroad as an American citizen and the opportunities of working in China and so much more. So make sure to check out Opportunity in China and their podcast. You can find links in the episode notes or simply go to opportunityinchina.com. Now let's dive into our interview with John McGarvey. Our guest today is John McGarvey. He is the co-founder and CEO of Dow Labs. He's also a Minneapolis-based entrepreneur. He's worked as an executive in the natural foods industry. He's worked on Wall Street, and he's done so many incredible things on the entrepreneurial journey he's been on. Super excited to have him on to talk about what he's building now and his journey to today. John, thanks for taking time out and being on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, you are the CEO and co-founder of Dell Labs, which is doing some really cool stuff. We're going to dive into that a whole bunch in our second segment. But tell us a little bit about Dell Labs to give us a foundational story of what you guys are doing, who you are, and what your role is.
Absolutely. So Dow Labs is a traditional Chinese medicine company. We like to think of ourselves both as a supplement company and also a lifestyle, because when we dive into traditional Chinese medicine, which is a practice that's been around for about 2,500 years, it's very holistic in nature. And so while we do try to monetize what we do on a daily basis through the transaction of herbs that I'll talk about here in a second, we really see ourselves as sort of a launching point for people that might be familiar with Chinese medicine, might kind of dabble with an acupuncturist periodically, might know enough about it, but get overwhelmed very easily, which is a significant barrier to this beautiful practice. Dell Labs is a startup that launched last year that is attempting to, and I think at times being very successful with, trying to translate all of that and take this practice that is so rich, so beautiful, yet so extremely powerful, and make it, we hope, very approachable to a Western audience. So we launched last year. We have a great team that's behind us, and we keep authenticity at the forefront of what we do. And so to kind of winnow it down, we take these very ancient, old, very classic Chinese medicine formulas, and we try to make them and package them in ways that Western consumers can kind of get their arms around and hopefully consume. Because when we look at Chinese medicine as a whole, like I said, it is very esoteric, it's very confusing. But when we get into the herbs themselves, despite how powerful they are, they're highly unpalatable when it kind of comes down to the actual brass tacks of consuming them. And talk to anyone that's tried Chinese herbs before, they'll tell you they do work, quote unquote, but it's tough to get down the hatch. So I've dumped a lot there, but that's in essence what we're doing, is trying to make this practice much more approachable.
So for you, you've done a lot. How did this entrepreneurial journey start for you?
I've sort of been an entrepreneur all my life, although my career didn't start out that way. I attended Northwestern University in Chicago decades ago, it seems like now, or ages ago, I should say. And while the path from a career standpoint was very traditional then, I think ultimately I always had that sort of entrepreneurial bug deep down inside me. So when I graduated, I went into investment banking, and I worked first on Wall Street as a sales trader, and then ultimately I joined the ranks of a private equity firm in New York City. And I remember very explicitly sitting in a cubicle one night and just being kind of not happy. I don't know if I want to go so far as to say I was miserable, but that's a very grinding, sort of tough sort of position to find yourself in, particularly if you're somebody who's like me, a bit more dynamic and likes to touch a lot of things and be involved with a lot of decision making and all this kind of stuff all at the same time. So it was during that experience that a mentor of mine, who was then leading the initiatives from a private equity standpoint at Bear Stearns, which is kind of starts to date me. It said, if you really want to get good at this stuff, and I'll never forget. He's like, there are a million of you financial wonks in this town, and he's like, if you really want to get good at private equity, I mean, if this is your calling, you need to go figure out kind of how a cash flow statement works, and that in particular resonated. Particularly now, where cash is ultimately very important when you're an entrepreneur. And it's one thing to run a financial model as you're sitting in a cubicle on Park Avenue wearing a suit and thinking that you're just this incredible genius, but it's an entirely different thing to actually make the numbers behind that function and work. And so his advice back then, Michael, was in essence, go find something that needs some sort of like smart help. And I put that smart in quotations, but something that is totally outside the realm of New York City and this lifestyle, and go pursue that. And I'm going to jump just a little bit, but because I did then leave the rank and file of financial services of New York, and I moved to Tibet, and that's very important as far as my story is concerned. But from a more conventional standpoint, to hark on his feedback, I ultimately found a frozen food company that was in, of all places, a dot on the map, St. Augustine, Florida, and I really kind of stuck my claws into that experience from the perspective of, that was tough, but ultimately holding on to something and touching something. And at the end of the day, being able to kind of look and feel and sniff and taste in this case. And it was no looking back from there. I thought that I was going to sort of do that for 3 years, which was fairly conventional, and then boomerang back to Wall Street or to private equity. But I never left in sort of short order.
That's super cool. It's been an awesome journey, or a very unexpected journey, it sounds like, for you to go through this process of evolving your career, evolving your passions, and connecting satisfaction in what you're doing with the work that you're doing. For you now, how are you finding that purpose, that significance in what you're doing?
Well, I think it comes down, and that's a great question, and I think purpose is everything. I believe so wholeheartedly in the products that we're manufacturing, that we're distributing now, and not just the products, but the herbs and the power of what these things do. Most entrepreneurs that have been incredibly successful, be it Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, just go down the list, they never did it for money. And I was saying to my wife about a month and a half ago that I feel like finally I'm on this mission. And she did this incredible double take. She's like, I never heard you say that.
Mm.
And to kind of make that leap from, I think we can really monetize this or make a lot of money, to like, no, I need to inform people. Like, I need to educate people that this stuff works. It's out there, it's available, but you gotta kind of listen to me, or you got to talk to somebody else, and just, it can change your life. And I think that, amongst all else, is what really keeps John McGarvey going right now.
That's super cool. So let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying here correctly, because if I am, I think it's massively profound. And what I think I just heard you say is that as entrepreneurs, we really need to take and look at what we're doing and put mission over money. And we have to survive. We have to be able to provide for ourselves, but always keeping that mission central to our DNA as entrepreneurs is significant.
Absolutely. And I might get into this later on with some of the discussion points, but if we are to fail, or if we were to fail, and that's a hypothetical because that's not an option for me, but if we were, I'd probably get up the next morning and start an identical company doing the same thing better, without the heritage and the baggage. But I think that speaks to your point in particular. It's God, if we don't do this, somebody else is going to, and not that we're going to lose out on the opportunity, but like, it's a great opportunity because somebody else is going to see the opportunity, and so that kind of just reinforces naturally this, like, well, God, this stuff works. And so we've just got to do it. And not only that, when we think about the profound way in which we can make people's lives better, and this isn't some sort of scientific or high-tech app necessarily, high-tech app, because there is some science behind it, but this is stuff that's been around for, as I said earlier, 2,500 years. And if people just knew, if they just only knew that this stuff was at their disposal, then in some cases, and if you read my blog, or some of my blog articles, I should say, I talk about how some of these herbs have changed my life. And I that's not BS. I mean that wholeheartedly. And it's, God, if we could just tell more people about this, particularly in this day and age with blue screens in the bedroom at night, a whirlwind vortex of news coming at us, particularly out of Washington. It's like, God, if we could just find a way to chill out, and I've got a tool to help you do that. I'm rambling here, but it's the passion. So
yeah. Yeah, I don't think you're rambling at all. I think what we're all hearing in your words is that you are passionate about what you do because you see the purpose that how it can impact others, how it can impact not only your lives, but the lives of others around you. And at a global level, it can really revolutionize some of the approaches that we take to medicine and how we can solve some of the issues that we're struggling with as a society right now.
Totally. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about the purpose. That's that emotional, that's that drive, that hopefully it's a flywheel that just keeps spinning, that keeps you moving as an entrepreneur, because it's a grind, it's tough.
Yeah.
All of the things that you read about and hear about from an emotional standpoint, it's all true. Yeah. And I thought I was above that, but ultimately I'm not, and I'm human, and this can be very, very stressful, but it's that purpose-driven sort of mission behind what we're doing, both intrinsically for me as a person, as an entrepreneur, but then most certainly as a business as well.
Super, super cool. Now, for you, as you're growing this startup and as you're launching something that is very foreign to, I think, the average American or Westerner for that matter, what's one challenge that you're currently working to overcome in the business and for you?
In the business, it's the explaining of what this stuff does and trying to build the trust and the authority behind not only the practice, but also of us as a company. We're not Procter and Gamble. We're not GlaxoSmithKline. We're a startup that is pushing a practice that's been around for 2,500 years, that doesn't necessarily have a tremendous amount of science behind it, but boy, oh boy, it's got legions and legions of followers, both here in the U.S. and certainly, overseas. And so I think from a challenge standpoint, we have spent a lot of money on digital advertising that just didn't work, and so there's only so much you can convey in a Facebook ad that you totally miss out on in a forum like this, as an example, or just that interactive or intimate conversation with somebody else. Particularly again, given the practice that we are out pushing and we're behind. It's this is esoteric stuff. It's got some stigmas to it. It doesn't taste great, but if you just would listen and learn a little bit, you could find out how life changing it can be. And so that's something that, particularly as a startup that is focused on driving, sales, transacting on our website, which is a fancy way of saying we're in e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
Being able to communicate that when there's just tremendous amount of stuff out there, that's a challenge. On a personal level, I think that the biggest thing that I have to always work with is the focus on my time, and how I'm prioritizing, the decisions and how I'm spending my time. And there are a lot of tools that I use. I don't want to say a lot of tools, but I have a couple of practices that I stick to. But just the focus and trying to prioritize, that's something that just very candidly is something I constantly am working to do better at.
I think so many of us can relate to that for sure. I know for me, those systems, those practices, they're a daily challenge to get us to that next level and just tuning them, refining them, being aware of what's working, what's not working. For you, in this process, in this evolution of the business, what's the next big goal you have for where you want to take the business?
That's a great question. I think that we need to continue to round out our product portfolio.
Okay.
We have tremendous, I don't want to say even interest, but we get a lot of demand from the natural health practitioner, acupuncture, holistic medicine community. And I think that for us to be successful in that channel, we need to offer more diversity and depth to what we're offering, and do so in a way that allows us to differentiate ourselves among the other competitors out there, because there are, and staying true to our true north of trying to be innovative in the process. And it's very tedious, quite candidly. As I keep mentioning, this stuff, has a taste stigma that we're constantly having to overcome. And then it's also, in that particular channel, you call it upwards of 40,000 acupuncturists and just as many natural health doctors out there. And they're all kind of different, and they all want something that's different. Yeah. And so trying to use the appropriate marketing tools and those tools that we're endowed with, ears, eyes, and a mouth, proportionally, to make the right decisions, particularly when it comes to those decisions that have a tremendous amount of working capital requirements that are behind them. So when we bring something to market, we want to make sure it works.
Super, super cool. We're going to go so much deeper into Dell Labs and what John and his team is building. We'll be right back with John McGarvey. Today's podcast is sponsored by Opportunity China. We are super excited to partner with them as they are helping so many people learn abroad and also teach abroad. Here is a little bit more about their podcast, the Opportunity in China podcast.
At the dawn of the 19th century, forward-thinking people moved to the commercial centers of Europe. Moving into the 20th century, America welcomed millions into the land of freedom and opportunity. It is now the 21st century. Many of the successes and fortunes of our generations will be made in China. To learn how you can seize opportunity in China, follow the Opportunity in China podcast. The Opportunity in China podcast is available anywhere podcasts are streamed, or you can visit our website at opportunityinchina.com.
Now let's jump back into the conversation we had with John McGarvey, the co-founder and CEO of Dow Labs. We are back with John McGarvey, and we're talking about Dow Labs, his entrepreneurial journey, and the idea behind this holistic health and using old approaches to solve modern problems. I was recently reading an article where a girl in her woman in her late 20s, early 30s was talking about how she had all these digestive issues, all of these different ailments, and she, by all appearances, looked healthy. And she went to the doctor, said to the doctor, "Hey, do you think maybe what I'm consuming as an individual, my diet, is maybe playing into this?" And the doctor looked and said, No. You got a stomach issue. Here's a drug. You're creating a space that actually brings healthy change versus a pharmaceutical change in health. So let's talk a little bit about holistic health versus pharmaceutical health?
Sure. I think the example you just gave resonates with not only a lot of Western society, but certainly Chinese medicine at
Yeah.
large. And I
Yeah.
want to point out, with all due respect to my colleagues and also those in the field that have more training than I am not a doctor of Chinese medicine. I'm not an acupuncturist.
Okay.
We have a team of those that work with us, but I point that out, and I know more than the average bear. But if there's nothing else that people take away from this program, is that I would encourage them to incorporate an acupuncturist or a Chinese medicine doctor into their health toolkit, because it is not scary, it's not intimidating, it's not painful, and this actually will go back to your question, Michael, in particular. Is it's very, very effective, and despite the fact that there's not a lot of Chinese herb companies on the market right now, there are a lot of acupuncturists across the United States. And if you don't have one or have questions about it, we are nothing if not transparent, and also eager beavers to talk with people. So you just reach out to us on my Dow Labs, and we'll get into contact information later on. But we can certainly, we've got a crew of acupuncturists that we work with across the country, Canada, and now Europe as well. And so when you think about the experience of visiting an acupuncturist, to the example you just gave, it always starts with digestion. And it's the digestive health topics that we don't necessarily want to talk about on a day-to-day basis. But everyone's got a digestive story, or they've got digestive issues. Yeah. And in Chinese medicine, it all starts in your stomach. And in particular, organs like the spleen and kidney and the lungs, things that we don't necessarily prioritize in the West. And the reason for that is because they feel, as I mentioned, that health begins in the stomach and it pushes its way out. And the beautiful thing about Chinese medicine versus Western medicine is the fact that it treats the whole, not just the symptom.
Right.
It's not just let's try this and see if it works. Oh, that didn't work. Well, let's go on to the next thing. And it's like going down this litany, as opposed to let's take a more holistic global view of what's going on in your life. What is your digestive sort of story right now? When a Eastern doctor will check your pulse, they're not just checking beats per minute, but they're checking the energy of the pulse itself, and that in turn allows them to be able to learn much more about you. I won't want to say much more about you, but learn about you in very different ways.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you say strength, you're talking or energy, you're talking about like the strength of the pulse and how it acts and that kind of thing.
That's correct. Okay. That's correct. It's a very curious process, depending on the chops of your acupuncturist. They are able, through just feeling the pulse and the strength, and they're going to start to use terms that are very esoteric, which is part of our challenge. But it's your qi, it's your yin, it's your yang, it's depletion, and they can feel that, and they can, in so doing, they can start learning kind of what's going on in your life kind of right now. So like, for example, you could be laying there and they could be feeling it, and they're like, oh, were you out running around the last 3 days or something like that? I mean, you feel really exhausted, so they're able to have this look under the hood, so to speak, without, having to draw any blood. And so as a consequence, when you go in for an acupuncture treatment, and I want to point out that I see an acupuncturist 3 to 4 times a month, they're able to put together sort of a plan and a regimen that is very, very dynamic and diversified, not just treating the one particular issue. And you can go in there. It's very cool. You can go in there and you can layer things on that you're saying, oh, I'm hungover today, or I've got, a bad knee or something. But they will start to talk more about you as the person, as opposed to just, well, let me hear more about that hangover, John. And as a consequence, I am rambling, but ultimately, you leave that sort of experience, that appointment, with a plan that kind of like, we can kind of move your chi or your yin or your yang, but ultimately, you can feel much better in ways that you didn't think possible.
That's super, super cool. Now, I am a big fan of alternative medicine and different approaches to health. Big fan of chiropractic. My wife's been an acupuncturist before. We completely agree that digestion and what you eat is so significant as part of this journey. So we really believe in alternative health options, although, we still see regular doctors, everything like that. We've uh, done all kinds of different things when we lived in Northern California when it came to chiropractic and acupuncture and looking at diet. And all of those things made massive differences.
Yeah.
I think back to a Netflix show that I was watching, and it was all about travel. This specific host went to China. I've been to China. I've been to Thailand and Southeast Asia. And so I know talking to some of these people, their approach to health is so much different. But watching this Netflix show, he went to this health person and they did all of this stuff. And then they said, here's your daily tea that you need to drink so that you're going to get healthy. And he talked about exactly the same issue, the stigma of what it tasted like and the process. So for you, in creating these different formulas, you have an immunity support, a digestive harmony, a woman's monthly kit, an emotional balance, a women's formula, a mental tranquility, and a physical tranquility.
Yeah.
How are you creating these different formulas, and how are they really used in people's daily lives?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, when you look at our values, foremost among them as a company is authenticity.
Right.
So we're not just a bunch of hacks that happen to stumble upon herbs and you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. These are formulas that we take very, very seriously. They're very safe when we think about being able to treat the masses, because you can in Chinese herbal medicine begin to put together some stuff that's very individualized. These are very broad, very beautiful formulas. And so my partner, Dr. Eric Karchmer, is a renowned acupuncturist. He speaks globally. He's an active doctor of Chinese medicine and a professor, studied in China for 8 years. He was the gentleman who was the brains behind these are the formulas that we should start with. Now, when we get into the herbs themselves, the stigma comes from the fact that they taste very, very bitter. And the most popular sort of Chinese herb, or the one that people can kind of latch onto the best, is ginseng, which gives you just this jolt of energy. And you can buy it at Whole Foods, you can buy it truck stops even. And ginseng tastes terrible. I mean, it tastes absolutely terrible, but if you want to get moving naturally, it'll do the trick. So our challenge was, all right, if we know that's a barrier to people either trying them to begin with or repeat purchasing, then we've got to solve for that.
Yeah.
And our desire, though, wasn't necessarily to mask it entirely, because we want to make sure people know this isn't just like sugar water, like other powdered vitamin supplements, but also it's tough. And I think we as a company have gotten much better at trying to quote unquote mask the flavor. But that was foremost amongst these is trying to make it so you could, one, get it down the hatch repeatedly, but then number two is do it in a convenient manner, because a lot of Chinese medicine, you got to boil it and you got to add honey and you got to make a concentration. And we wanted to make this so it's totally on the go. So the products themselves are the ones you listed. The challenge is that these are very broad formulas and they do things that are above what we call them. So, for example, our emotional balance. It's based off of an 8 herb combination called Xiao Yao San, which is a very beautiful formula combination. It translates to free and easy wanderer, and it essentially just helps calm the mind and cool the spirit a little bit, and just makes something that's very unfettered and chaotic at times, i.e. your mind, it just kind of slows it down, gives you a little bit of energy, but it just rounds things out. Well, that's great for women as they're going through PMS. It's great for anybody that's a little, stress prone, or we don't talk about anxiety because that's a medical condition, but it seems to help just kind of chill people out. But by the same token, the formula is great for digestion.
Okay.
And you can't necessarily say this is for stress, PMS, and oh, by the way, for digestion, and so we have to spend a lot of time communicating that this could be a fit for you, even though you don't fall necessarily in the one sort of bucket that we call it. So it's a challenge for us to name these things, but ultimately I think we've done a great job sort of putting them in the right category and then providing the supporting information behind the scenes to recommend it, even if it's not the original purpose for which you're purchasing it. So we've launched last year with 4 foundational formulas that are incredible, and then just last month we launched our new sleep series, which I said earlier on the show. There's one formula that has changed my life. It's our mental tranquility.
Okay.
I'm somebody who is very prone to waking up at 2 a.m. Beating myself up, thinking about my list of things to do, thinking about stuff I had to work on. And then it becomes this self-fulfilling, like, oh my God, now it's 2:30. Now it's 3 o'clock. I'm going to be tired tomorrow. Damn it. Now it's 3, and it's just this
Yeah.
long drawn out thing. And I was introduced to this formula through my partner, Dr. Eric, by default. When we were launching Dell Labs, it was, there's a lot on my plate. It was very stressful and I wasn't sleeping well. He's like, oh, you got to try this. You got to try these herbs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next thing you know, we had a new product on our hands. So it's a long-winded way of saying they're beautiful formulas. They're very effective, we think, and we think we've done a nice job making them much more palatable than if you were to just buy them off the shelf.
For sure. I was just looking over the supplemental facts for some of them, and so often when we see whether it's vitamins, whether it's a food or supplement, we look over the ingredients and we just go, there's a whole bunch of chemicals. I have no idea what these are. But you look at like yours and you have things like ginger root, like licorice root, like hawthorn berry, like sprouted barley and red tangerine. These are all real things. And there's a whole bunch of other things on here that are hard to say, but they're definitely real products. They're herbs, they're spices, there are other things in there that are natural. For you in this process, I know one of the most significant things is that you want things that are sustainable, and you also want them to be sourced ethically too. So in creating these products, you're creating something that is good for you, but also good for the environment and good for community. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Absolutely. That goes back to the sort of the DNA of who both I am and then as well my partners.
Right.
And then it also kind of speaks to that why of the business, and it's helpful to be able to push something that hopefully allows us to be good citizens in the process. So when we look at Chinese medicine, it's ripe with examples of people being very unethical in the practice and the trade of herbs or, in some cases, animals that have theoretically medicinal purposes behind them. And I get that from time to time where it's, oh, did you kill any rhino or things of that nature? And it's like, well, no, absolutely not.
Right.
And knowing that stigma was out there, we partnered with a great organization in San Francisco called Wild Aid. And if you're not familiar with Wild Aid, I'd invite you to see their website. It's wildaid.org. And essentially they advocate against the poaching of exotic animals for commercial purposes. Okay. They've got incredible ambassadors from Richard Branson to Yao Ming to Leonardo DiCaprio, but their mission is absolutely incredible, and they're incredibly successful in their pursuit. They've, in some cases, taken claim, as well they should, for eradicating shark fin poaching across Asia, and for good reason. So we've partnered with them, and we give a portion of our proceeds, our revenue, to them on a monthly basis. And so there's that aspect, and then there's number two is we wanted to be as transparent as possible. And so if you go to our website, we're very open with not only the products and the roots and the herbs, but we talk about the process we go through. I'm proud to say that we manufacture things here in the U.S., not from just patriotic perspectives, but from a safety standpoint. My background's in food, and this is an ingestible, and it does start in China. And rightly, wrongly, there's some connotation negatively perhaps around that. And so we test and we retest, and we do a DNA fingerprinting and all that kind of jazz here in the U.S. And we're very open, by the way, with that process. And I think we should be, because that ultimately hopefully allows us to make the competition pony up as well. So I think the moves that we're making allow us not only to be better citizens, but to sleep better at night as well.
So good. I want to hear a little bit of your story. It's a very fun story on how you actually first experienced Chinese herbal medicine. You were in Tibet. Yep. Working in microfinance with what was the Tibetan Poverty Alleviation Fund. Yeah. Yep. And that was kind of your first introduction to it. There was a specific formula that you were introduced to, and it was the catapult into this journey that you're on today. So tell us that story.
Well, there are two formulas that I'll talk about, but in essence, I left New York City to to go a totally different direction for a couple years. And I lived in Tibet and worked at the TPAF, the Tibet Poverty Alleviation Fund. And that is a whole other story of how I wound up there, but it's short of marrying my wife and having my kids. It was one of the best experiences of my life, if not the best. And it was good work. It was a cool area, great people. It was once in a lifetime. But you get over there and you get to the Tibetan plateau, and you are off the grid. I mean, this is the early 2000s, and it is not.
Right.
Now it's much different, but even still, it was just like, oh my god, a bit of a cowboy, wild west sort of experience. But the food standards, as you can imagine, are not like eating something that comes off of a Nestle facility in Topeka, Kansas. So I got very sick on Thanksgiving, and I shudder, or the hair on the back of my neck starts to stand up when I begin thinking about it. But and this is true. I was totally cured with Chinese, and in this case, Tibetan herbs. I obviously had some sort of foodborne illness, and it was intense. And consequently, we couldn't get to a Western doctor, and so we just went to a pharmacy, and did a few of the things that we talked about, the pulse and the tongue and whatnot. And the next thing you know, I get an herbal combination, and it worked. For me, it entirely worked. And so it's like, well, gee, this is really incredible stuff. I fast forward to today. I wish I kind of had some of that, because like kids get sick and they start to vomit and all that kind of jazz. And it's, there's not a lot that can treat that, but I digress. But in any event, it was that experience, 15 years ago or so, that kind of helped propel me to be like, you know what, there's something there. It was that formula. And then as well, the Free and Easy Wander, that's where I was initially introduced to that. And it just helps calm the mind and the body. And it's so beautiful. And I just knew there was something there.
That's crazy. It's super cool, and a great experience. Now, for you, you're experiencing in Tibet for the first time something that's very ancient, and us Westerners, we like to think that we have it all figured out. We know how to solve every problem, and we'll use our intellect, and we write off the ancient. And I think a lot of people have this stigma around some of these alternative health options. What would you want them to really know about these ancient remedies that have staying power and truth to them?
I think that it's no longer taboo to say that in our case, that you see an acupuncturist for a specific need. And there are wonderful examples, and they're somewhat cliche, but I'll point to two. You've got Michael Phelps during the last Olympics, who was covered all over his back with these red dots, and he had seen an herbalist or an acupuncturist before his meet to in this case, I'm assuming he was moving some chi and he was trying to get the energy into his back muscles. Okay. But even better, you look at Tom Brady, who despite losing the Super Bowl last year is still playing like he's right out of college.
Yeah.
And he's got a guy on the sidelines named Alex Guerrera, who's a traditional Chinese medicine doctor,
Wow.
and there's something going on there. And I can't speak to what Alex is doing for Tom Brady, but there is something very much going on there. On a more nuanced micro level, it's not so much nuanced, but I hear this all the time. The number of people that have come up to me in this journey of Dow Labs and saying that they used acupuncture or Chinese medicine for fertility and family planning purposes, it is much more common than people would think. And the success rate with that is incredibly high as well. And these aren't necessarily people that are hippies living on a farm or something like that, that would be a caricature. These are very just the opposite, mainstream, professional, not that farmers aren't, but you know what I'm saying? These are not what you would suspect. And
Right.
so I think you just have to try it one or two times. And that could be taking a Dow Labs product, or that could be visiting an acupuncturist to know the power behind this stuff. And so again, that's part of what we're trying to do, is demystify it, provide some context and some information around it, and make it less intimidating to all of a sudden try. Like, you couldn't pronounce some of the herbs on that was Digestive Harmony, I believe you were reading.
Yeah.
And to be able to say, all right, it's got all these things, but let's just have you try it and see that it works and you can swallow it. And then we can get you to be a believer.
Yeah, for sure. there are two new formulas that you have out, the mental tranquility and the physical tranquility. Both of them have to relate to sleep and better sleep. Why two? Why mental? Why physical? How are they different? And how can that impact us?
It's totally. So, from an addressable market standpoint, there are, particularly in this day and age, I mean, the number of Americans that have sleep issues, is incredible. But we all have different reasons as to why we're not sleeping. The number one product out in the market today to help you sleep better is melatonin. Well,
Okay.
melatonin is a hormone. And your body is naturally producing it. And so for you to go in and start, pushing down the gas pedal, and taking more of it is what leads to fogginess, a little bit of lack of alertness, grogginess, in some cases bad dreams. We're not feeling all that well, but nonetheless, it's still is the number one sort of solution when people have sleep issues. Well, that can help you fall asleep. Okay. And melatonin does, but that's not going to help you stay asleep.
Okay.
And that's where our formulas and what we're doing differentiate ourselves from just, run-of-the-mill melatonin. We have two formulas, and we could have made 4 or 6 because we're trying to ultimately put people into 2 different camps. And I'll explain the difference. Number one, we've got our mental tranquility, and that was the formula I talked about. It's absolutely incredible if you've got a mind that is going nonstop. Okay. It's perfect to help you stay asleep throughout the night. And in the events that you do wake up, it helps you just naturally fall back to sleep. It's great the next day. I don't think of any yet today, but you can drink it during the day and it won't knock you out.
Okay.
For most people. Okay.
Yeah.
Some people it will. Whoa, I got to go to bed right now. But the herbs there are meant to naturally keep your body into a rhythm that when it is time to go to bed, it's going to help you stay asleep. But during the day, you're going to be more mentally alert. You're going to be really sharp. I hate to use the term like hacking or things like that nature, but it's like it will really help the mind focus. And any acupuncturist will tell you in school, these are the herbs that they would take around finals and for tests, during the testing periods. So that's our mental tranquility. But then the second formula is equally beautiful. It's physical tranquility, which has got even more herbs in it. And that's to help cool and calm a restless physical body. So if you're agitated and you're twitching and you're increasingly hot in the night, this is the formula for you. And so we think about women that are going through menopause as an example. This is a wonderful formula for them. But it's also for those that are just naturally agitated, restless legs or just kind of, twitching a lot. And that's the reason that you stay awake. It can be equally as powerful. So we came up with 2. And if you go to our website, there's a little bit of a checklist that you can kind of walk yourself through that helps you figure out which formula would be best for you.
So every time you hear about these kind of products, I think of, I won't name any other products, but
Sure.
often they're tied to the whole MLM multiple, or what is it?
Multi-level marketing.
Thank you. There we go.
Yep.
That's the words I'm looking for. Is your product falling that camp? How are you guys marketing this, positioning yourself, and getting the word out?
Oh, absolutely. No, we are not an MLM company. There are just 2 ways to procure us right now. You can go to our website, mydaolabs.com, mydaolabs.com, or you can go visit an acupuncturist. We're not available at Whole Foods or at Target or in mass retail. We're trying to control that experience from a distribution standpoint. We're not available on Amazon either, which I think makes us more successful in the acupuncture trade. So a patient can't be introduced to our products, there and then run to Amazon and continue to buy it there on a go-forward basis. So right now we are definitely not MLM. We are just strictly controlling the channels of distribution so we can talk to you directly or equally and perhaps more impactfully through an acupuncturist.
Super, super cool. How else can people find and connect with you?
Absolutely. The best way to do it is through our website, mydowlabs.com. We have an incredibly active and a cool blog, we think, called The Way, which is Dao is all about your way. And in it, we have recipes, we do interviews, we have some videos on there that kind of, again, try to dissect this beautiful practice and do it in a way that, like our recipes, for example, they're all recipes that fill a sort of a Chinese medicine inspired diet, which to cut to the chase is all about protecting your digestive health. But we have those recipes with Western ingredients, the stuff you could find at your grocery store and not have to go to kind of a specialty market to pick that stuff up.
Right.
We're also incredibly active on Instagram. That's the social platform that we embrace the most. And again, it's very interactive. We've got a great crew that drives engagement in the conversation and whatnot. And last but not least, people are free to email me, and my email is all over the website. Just read any of my articles, and you'll find it at the bottom.
No, I've actually checked out the blog in preparation for this interview. I've tried 2 of the products so far, Digestive Health and Immunity. I'm looking forward to trying out the Emotional and the rest ones coming up in the next week or 2. Super cool products, super cool company, great blog resources. Make sure you check it out. You can find all the links in the episode notes. And in a moment, we'll be back with John and diving into our rapid fire questions. The heartbeat of Jumblethink is to help dreamers turn their ideas and dreams into reality. One of the ways we do that is through this podcast, but another way we do it is through the free guides that we offer. In a recent episode, we talked about the dreamer's method to micro experiments, and now we have a guide to walk you through the process of using micro experiments to turn ideas and dreams into reality. So here's what you need to do. Swing on over to jumblethink.com/guide and download your free guide, The Dreamer's Method to Micro Experiments. Again, to download that free guide, all you have to do is go to jumblethink.com/guide. Now let's join our rapid fire questions with John McGarvey. We are back with John McGarvey. He is the co-founder and CEO of Dow Labs, doing really cool stuff. John, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Let's bring it on.
Cool. Our first question is, what is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Break it down into bite-sized chunks and get moving.
Love it. What's one change you'd like to see in the world?
More thoughtfulness and mindfulness.
What do you want your legacy to be?
As a really nice humanitarian.
Love that. Where do you find inspiration?
From my family, particularly my wife and kids.
Okay, so now every once in a while we throw in a wild card. Today we're going to do it. Today's wild card question for you is, what is one trend that you are super excited about that you currently are seeing in our culture and society?
Absolutely. It's putting down the phones.
I love that.
I can't say enough great things about keep the phone out of the bedroom.
So powerful and good. I agree 100% with that one. What is one book you think every dreamer and entrepreneur should read, and why?
Absolutely. You should read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Okay.
It's not a top 10 lists or how I did it or whatnot. It's a great story of, how he did build Nike. And it starts at the beginning and it ends about a year and a change ago. And any entrepreneur who's got a dream, has a vision, has a product, and finds themselves in the weeds or the trenches or is looking for how to align themselves with passionate people, that's the book for you.
What is one tool that is significant for the success of your business?
I think Instagram. Is that, okay. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Is that a tool?
Absolutely.
I know it's a good tool.
Matter of fact, all that to say, I'm with you. We're actually downsizing some of our social footprint and really focusing on Instagram for Jumblethink ourselves. We just love it.
Yeah, I think for us, focus is key.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a very discreet audience that we're trying to attract, and we know what message resonates with them. And I think for the time being, as long as we stay in that lane, we know we're kind of successful there.
What's one habit you find helpful in your life as an entrepreneur?
Exercise. I go for, I should say, not daily, but I attempt to go for a daily walk in the morning. I can't run anymore, but I'll typically get up and walk 3 to 4 miles.
Wow. How do you start and finish your day?
Start by walking, which is, we said earlier, I'm in Minneapolis, so it's cold in the winter, but there's a great way to clear the head, get a jump on your day. Typically don't need as much coffee as a consequence, and just organize your thoughts. So I try to start with a nice long walk, and then I end my day harking back to what I just said about keeping the phone out of the bedroom. I'm trying to read and do a bit more journaling.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
Yeah, I think I would be running a bakery.
Wow.
There's a bakery down the street from our house that It just seems like such a happy place. and I wouldn't be a baker per se, but it's like, man, they've just got to figure it out. And not to say I'm unhappy or my office is an unhappy place, but there's just this wonderful energy. The food is great. Everyone coming in there is going in for like a great reason to get like a great pastry or a kick-ass cup of coffee. Yeah. And the guy and the team that run it there just have this great connection with everyone who comes in. It's kind of like Cheers, but in a South Minneapolis bakery situation. And it's like, God, that seems really cool.
That's super, super fun. What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Absolutely. I want to make a documentary. Yeah. I know what the documentary is going to be about. It's going to be not to surprise or shock anyone, but it's going to be about Chinese medicine. Right. And I just wrote a book last year, actually published it this year. And so I've accomplished that. And next thing is I want to tackle a film.
That is super cool. Love that. As we wrap up today's episode, what's one final thought you want to leave us with today?
The final thought I would leave goes back to what I said. If you've never tried acupuncture, for any myriad number of reasons, give it a shot. It's a beautiful, very powerful practice. It doesn't hurt, but it can be very effective.
John, it's been a lot of fun learning about what you're doing and how you're bringing the old to a new philosophy and how it's changing people's lives. Thanks so much for taking time out today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Once again, we want to thank today's guest, John McGarvey, for taking time out, sharing his story, and giving us some insights into this different way of thinking about our health. You can find links and more information in the episode notes. We want to thank today's episode sponsor, Opportunity in China. If you haven't already, make sure you check out our past episode with MC Miller as we talked about opportunities in China, whether it's to go and learn or to go and teach. There are some incredible opportunities to go overseas and make a difference in the lives of those people you're serving, but also make a better life for yourself. You can learn more by going over to opportunityinchina.com. You can also check out their very, very cool podcast. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to encourage you, get out there and chase those dreams. You may think that they're not significant or possible, but I'm here to tell you that they are, and it's worth it. So whatever your dream is, whatever your big idea is, start taking the steps to making that a reality. Start making it happen and changing the world around you. As always, get out there, chase those dreams, and change the world around you.
Cherchez la meilleure position. Les bras et les jambes légèrement espacés. Étirez-vous doucement, mais complètement. En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.